Police. Hello. What's going on?
How you doing, man? What's going on?
Oh, he's just off the chain. Incoherent.
Who's that?
Chopping up people in the sun. Bipolar schizo.
What's going on?
You drop that for me. Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Bravo 7.
Drop it.
Shots fired. Cover code 3. Drop that.
Drop it. Drop it.
Put it down. Bravo 725. We need fire rescue at this location. We got a black male. Gunshot wound to the torso.
1042, doing Karen. I need code 3 cover.
God. We're all right, man. It's all right, buddy. Drop it, guy.
Put the damn thing down. Put the screwdriver down. Put the screwdriver down.
Drop it. Just stay back, right? Just stay back. We're getting more people in here, guy.
10-4.
Nothing.
Put the screwdriver down.
Drop it, guy. Shit. Man, stand back on
Your
it.
camera rolling?
Yeah, it's rolling. Yours?
Mine's, of course, mine crapped out. Man.
Bravo 36, you want to go that way instead? 10-4.
Drop it, guy.
He's unconscious. You're good. You're good. Cover me.
Oh, man.
Charlie Henry 700, there's going to be officer involved. Bravo 725.
Bravo 715, shots fired on officers.
Bravo 725. Officers are good. We got a male black shot.
10-4.
I ain't got gloves, man.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Jesus Christ.
Tell 720, was this officer involved or did the person barricade or what? So we know what to do.
I got it.
Officer involved, look like this individual is going to be shot in the torso.
Bravo 725.
Just stand back, okay?
Officers are good.
Officers are involved.
Officers involved shooting. We have a man down.
You said this is not an officer involved shooting?
I got it.
Handle it.
Officers are involved in the shooting.
4. Tell 720, make all the notifications, please. 10-4.
All right, we're going to...
It's okay.
Yeah.
We're good.
He's still alive. He's still alive.
10-4.
We handcuff him? Just kick that over there. Don't let that get too far. Go on.
Yeah.
Rocky.
Yeah, watch that. He was in the doorway. He had a screwdriver. We had this behind us. We had to shoot. He came at us.
10-4.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So in Dallas, a 38-year-old mentally ill brother, Jason Harrison, was shot by Dallas PD in his own doorway in front of his mom 6 times. So let's go back and see what happened with my brother Jason Harrison that led him to get shot by Dallas police.
Tonight, another body cam video is putting a spotlight on deadly police force and sparking anger. The family of Jason Harrison, a mentally ill man shot dead by 2 Dallas officers, say they want the video to spark reforms in how police interact with the mentally ill. The day that Jason Harrison died, his mother had called police for help getting him to the hospital. Now, we want to warn you, the video is very graphic and obviously disturbing to watch. We'll let you decide what to make of it. Randy Kay has more.
2 Dallas police officers arriving for what they expect will be a routine disturbance call. Other officers had been to this home dozens of times before. This time would be different, and it's all about to be captured on the officer's body camera.
Police. Hello. What's going on?
How you doing, man? What's going on?
Shirley Harrison answers the door. She'd called police about her son Jason. He's bipolar schizophrenic and off his medication. She's trying to get him to the hospital.
Oh, he's just off the chain. Incoherent.
Who's
They were
that?
chopping up people in the sun. Bipolar schizo.
What's going on?
As Shirley walks out, police notice a screwdriver in her son Jason's hand. What happens next is hard to watch.
Drop that for me. Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay! That's
Within 10 seconds of the front door being opened, Jason Harrison lay dying in his own driveway, shot at least 5 times, twice in the back, by Officer John Rogers and Andrew Hutchins, who was wearing the body camera. His family says Jason hadn't committed any crime, nor did he likely understand why officers were even there.
What do you think police that day could have done differently?
They should not have been yelling orders off the top, because you've got someone that's mental, they're already confused. Now you stick a gun in their face and you yell at them.
When Shirley Harrison had called 911 for help, she told them her son was mentally ill and needed to get to a hospital.
They didn't take him to Parkland. They took him to the morgue.
So why did the officers open fire? Dallas police wouldn't talk to us, but the attorney for the officers did.
Was there any other option other than deadly force in this case?
No, there's not, because this is a deadly force encounter, and when you respond to lethal force, you respond to that with lethal force. A taser is a less lethal item.
Soon after the shooting, the officers signed affidavits about what happened. Both say Jason Harrison lunged at them, but here's the thing. Officer Hutchins says he lunged at Officer Rogers first and raised the screwdriver in the air. Officer Rogers says he lunged at Officer Hutchins first. Both officers agreed, though, that the screwdriver could have been used as a deadly puncture weapon. With Jason bleeding out in the driveway, backup arrives. Listen as Officer Hutchins tries to explain to the others why they fired.
He was in the doorway. He had a screwdriver. We had this behind us. We had to shoot. He came at us.
But did he? Watch again.
Drop that for me. Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
The Harrisons' family attorney says if Jason had really lunged at the officer, you would have seen his whole body fill the screen of the body camera.
No, he didn't lunge, he didn't stab, he didn't jab. There was no thrust, there was no Zorro move.
And what about after the shooting? The officers continued to yell at him to drop his weapon as he lay motionless. Listen.
All right, man. It's all right, buddy. Drop it, guy.
Put the damn thing down! Put the screwdriver down!
Oh, man.
After several minutes, Officer Rogers gets close enough to remove the screwdriver from the victim's hand, and then puts his hands behind his back.
We handcuff him?
Jason Harrison's mother had specifically requested officers who were trained to deal with the mentally ill answer this call. The attorney for these officers tell us they do have that training. About 5.5 minutes after the shooting, the ambulance arrives, but it was too late. Just 38, Jason Harrison was already dead.
So this brother, Jason Harrison, who suffers from schizophrenia and is bipolar, and he was off his medication, so his mom called 911 to get him some help. She went out of the way to make sure they knew that he was mentally ill and to please send trained police officers equipped to handle the situation. She made it clear that she just wanted him to go to the hospital.
CNN has obtained the 911 call that led 2 Dallas police officers to shooting and killing a mentally ill man last June. And on the recording, you can hear that victim, Jason Harrison's mother, ask the 911 operator to please send trained police officers to help take her son to the hospital. Have a listen.
Where's emergency?
Yeah, my son needs to be taken to Parkland. He's bipolar schizophrenia.
What's the address?
Yeah, he's really resting. He probably will be resistant. Do they send out training in tomorrow, police?
Yeah, they do.
And he's just off the chain. He's incoherent.
Okay.
Incoherent, and I go out of town seen by my mother, and I come back and hour and I can't get it.
Okay, what's his name?
I'm real afraid.
What's his name? Okay, any weapons? Anybody hurt?
No, but
okay.
He's talking about chopping people up.
He's talking about chopping people up. And now I want to show you what happened when the police did arrive. And I do have to warn you that the police body cam video we're about to show you is certainly graphic and without question disturbing.
you doing, man? What's going on?
Oh, this is off the chain. Incoherent.
Who's that?
Someone chopping up people in the sun. Bipolar schizo.
What's going on?
You drop that for me? Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it!
Jay!
Drop it!
Jay! Don't shoot! Oh, they killed my child! Oh, they killed my child!
Bravo 725, shots fired.
The body cam did not stop recording, and now I want to show you a clip from shortly after the shooting occurred. And you can hear EMTs who arrived on the scene talking about how they knew this victim from a previous call.
Here a couple of weeks ago, I mean, we knew it was just a matter of time. Something else went down.
You got called before?
Yeah. For him, he was threatening his mom, and his brother got his mom. I think so. He had a knife. His brother had a gun. A couple of weeks ago, they took him to Green Oaks, I believe. We were leaving. We said, man. And his brother said this has happened several times. We said it's just a matter of time.
So then officers John Rogers and Andrew Hutchins are the trained cops that end up responding to the call. And within 20 seconds, they ended up shooting him 6 times. Now, after they knock on the door, his mom comes out and she says again, he's a schizo and bipolar. And she wants him to go to the hospital. Then you see Jason Harrison come into the doorway holding this deadly screwdriver. Then the cops immediately pull their guns and start yelling for him to drop it. And within seconds, they shoot 6 times. Now, they claim he lunged at him with the screwdriver, but according to their stories, they both claim that he lunged at the other cop. They don't even have their story straight in the police report. Now, I don't know if they knew they were recording or not, but this is the first time a Dallas police shooting has ever been caught on camera. And even though originally they didn't want to release it, they claim that it backed up the officer's story. But when we see it, it contradicts the officer's story, even more than they contradict themselves. But even if the story was true, this man was laying on the ground with his head against the garage door, bleeding out, and they still got their guns on him, telling him to drop the screwdriver. They took more time after they shot him. When he was on the ground bleeding out, that's when they decided to take their time and to be safe and to be careful. Still holding him at gunpoint, but they were quick to pull the trigger in the first place. And after they finally take this dangerous screwdriver, they still try to put him in handcuffs. They claim they were still afraid of this mentally ill man who was bleeding out in his own driveway because he had a screwdriver. And since he had a deadly weapon, they had no other choice but to meet that with deadly force. Now, in my opinion, a taser is more deadly and more dangerous than a screwdriver is. But of course, the police department and a grand jury decided a screwdriver was deadly enough to justify them using their guns. And of course, a grand jury decided not to indict the officers.
The Dallas County Grand Jury declined to indict 2 Dallas police officers who killed a mentally ill man holding a screwdriver. Fox 4's Sean Rabb has been reporting on the Jason Harrison case for months. He's in our Dallas newsroom to bring you the latest.
Clarice, the officers have been back on duty for quite some time. That's the first indication Dallas police felt the shooting was justified all along. They were waiting to see if they would have to face any criminal charges based on the grand jury weighing the evidence. This, the first officer-involved shooting in Dallas, captured with a police body camera recording system. Jason Harrison's mother testified before the grand jury that would decide if the 2 officers who shot and killed her son would face criminal charges. It was June 2014 when Harrison called police because her son, 39-year-old Jason, with mental health problems, was out of control. Officers John Rogers and Andrew Hutchins answered the call.
How you doing, man? What's going on?
Oh, this is off the chain. Incoherent.
Who's that?
Someone chopping up people in the sun. Bipolar schizo.
Harrison's at the front door with a screwdriver. Police order him to drop it. He does not follow commands.
Jay!
Drop it!
Jay!
Both officers open fire. He's hit 5 times. Images too harsh for TV. The Dallas grand jury today did not indict the officers. Jason Harrison's brother, Sean.
Video is not enough. So if you have video and it's not enough, how do you get someone convicted of a wrongdoing? and you've got a video, and they're telling you that this video, what you see on this video is not what you see on this video.
Chris Livingston represents both officers.
Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with every family who's struggling with mental illness. And that's where we are with this. There are no winners in this situation.
We will remain undeterred.
Attorney Jeff Henley representing the family in an excessive force civil lawsuit.
Well, the videotape shows that our client, Jason Harrison, the decedent, was not lunging, he wasn't stabbing, he wasn't placing either one of these officers in imminent fear of death or death of serious bodily injury. So, we firmly believe that it was excessive force.
Now, the criminal proceedings come to an end for the two officers, but that excessive force civil lawsuit moves forward. Tomorrow, both officers are scheduled to give their depositions in that matter, which means they'll be questioned by attorney Jeff Henley.
So, Sean, the grand jury reached a decision rather quickly. This is a very serious matter. Is that standard procedure?
Yeah, Clarice, the proceedings are secret, so we'll never know, but I can tell you the process. Here's how it works in an officer-involved shooting. A prosecutor from the DA's office presents a package that the attorney for the police officers has presented to that grand jury. That likely included the police reports, the statements from the officers, the 911 call, and the body camera video. In addition to that, if there were any witnesses who were going to come forward, they would come before that grand jury today. We know Jason Harrison's mother gave her testimony, and perhaps a couple of other people. Those jurors ask questions if they have any, and then after the presentation, there is a secret vote. That vote takes place with the prosecutor outside of that grand jury room. It takes 9 members to say yes for an indictment, so it could be some mix of those, or it could have been all 14 felt that the police officers were justified. What we know is they will not face criminal charges from this point.
These cops were back on duty damn near before they finished investigating. So it's no surprise that in a secret meeting that the police had, they decided not to indict either of these cops. Keith Wensel, somebody who used to train Dallas PD, said that this situation was handled perfectly, and he will use this video as an example of what to do. And these are the same people deciding whether or not to press charges. Jason Harrison's family did try to file a civil lawsuit, but Judge David Godby ruled that they did not violate his civil rights.
As attorneys, listen, we need to be very clear that the family has launched a civil lawsuit against the Dallas PD. There is, in some of the court filings, there are suggestions that the police officers and fire and rescue and EMTs, etc., had been to this house 100+ times. 100+ times. Does that speak against the officers, or does that speak for the officers, given that they would have felt comfortable being there and that something must have happened for them to actually end up opening fire? Dan?
We've come a long way in responding to calls with mental illnesses and police training. In Dallas, like many other cities, police are trained in or through CIT, crisis intervention teams, to respond specifically to the growing problem of calls with mental illness. But that being said, even taking a 5-day course on how to respond to something like this, a call like this, put that up against the hours, the months, the years of training that police get, that at any moment, any event can escalate into something deadly. And what you have as a result is this sort of firing of neurons that clash with each other in the heat of the moment. Yes, they've been trained how to de-escalate a situation with someone with mental illness, but at the same time, they have so much training. They're so trained that anything could be deadly in a moment.
Joey, the police, in their defense, they say that this man lunged at them. It's hard to tell from that perspective. You really have to slow it down, watch it a whole bunch of times, and be a better investigator than I. Right. But again, they've been there hundreds of times. Can you see this playing the other way, or does this say, you'd been there hundreds of times and you knew what he was like?
Let's unpack this. I don't purport to know what police officers go through on the street, what must be a very difficult job. My dad was one. Through him I know. Through being a former prosecutor I know, but I don't know. But I will say this. I analyze this in 2 respects. Number one, was there an imminent threat posed that created sort of a deadly situation? Did they fear for their own life, or did they fear for serious bodily harm? That's number one. Even if you get to that step and answer yes, what concerns me and troubles me greatly is step number 2. Is the force you use proportionate to the threat posed? There needs to be, should be, and is a use of force continuum wherein police officers generally have pepper spray for a reason. They generally have a taser for a reason. They generally have a nightstick for a reason. That can be debated and argued, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, look, ultimately it will be. There's litigation that'll ensue. We could examine, re-examine. There may be a jury that's convened to look at that. But there needs to be some continuum wherein the force that you use is proportionate to the danger that's posed, and we have to evaluate, should we shoot now and ask questions later? That's a troubling point.
I mentioned that the civil lawsuit is against the Dallas PD. It's against the 2 members of the Dallas PD, and that is ongoing, and we'll continue to watch that. Danny and Joey, thank you for that. No matter how you slice it, that is just so awful, especially that mother.
Howling there.
Howling. She's in the middle of it all. It's just awful.
They had to do their best to criminalize this mentally ill brother. And Judge David Gabby said the police ordered for him to drop it, and despite evidence of the video and contradiction in their stories, this judge says he lunged towards them, putting these cops at risk. And of course they were scared for their lives. I'm sure they were terrified. But we have got to stop calling the police on our family members, especially our family with mental illness. I know how hard it can be to deal with, especially on those bad days. But the police are terrified, especially if you have some kind of mental illness. If you're not coherent and can comply with their demands in the first second, then you're resisting, you're a threat. We have to start finding a way to handle these kind of situations in-house. We need to handle all of our situations in-house, but especially situations like this. There is a lot of mental illness in the black community. We all probably suffer from some kind of mental illness in the black community. You can't have your whole history and identity stripped from you and not have some kind of mental illness from that. But there are cases of diagnosed mental illness, like autism. And if you've been around anybody with autism, sometimes they get into those moods where you cannot control them. But this is why we need to build organizations for ourselves to help ourselves. If we could start practicing group economics, and right now we can build an organization where we nominate successful black men and women to be on a committee strictly in charge of funding and helping grow black businesses. And if we're all contributing, we'll be able to build institutions. We'll be able to build schools, build hospitals. We'll be able to police and control our own communities. We'll be able to support politicians that's for the people, from the people. But while we're asking them to hold themselves accountable so we can get justice, we'll see this situation happening over and over and over. At some point, we're going to have to realize we're the only ones that can change things, and we're all we got.
Joining me now is Keith Wensel, who is a former police sergeant who trained officers for the Dallas Police Department and even developed a new curriculum for how to respond to situations like this. Keith, thanks so much for being with us. I really need your perspective on this. You told the Dallas Morning News that they did an absolutely perfect job. And I'll paraphrase here, adding that you would show this to students. You'd show them this video as an example of good tactics. Why is that?
Well, absolutely. Now, stand by that. When you watch this video, and keep this in mind, Ashley, you just, in just your opening statement right there, your opening question, less than 10 seconds, that's about the same time the officers had to make a decision of what force to use and how to handle this situation, okay? And I've watched this many, many times, probably 6 or 7 times already, and each time I see a different perspective. And the officers don't get that perspective. They have less than seconds to make a decision. Now, you got to understand, too, the fear that the officers in. I believe the officers did an absolute perfect job. Now, nobody's going to like the outcome of this. It is sad, it's tragic that the person in that door was shot and killed. But keep this in mind, Ashley. I mean, this family had, and I just learned that what the person is deceased is 36, 37 years old, I believe. I thought he was 20. That's what I was told initially. Mm-hmm. They've had 30-something years with this young man, and they couldn't control him to the point where they needed the police to come help. And these officers are.
Yeah, that's part of the issue that I'm struggling with here, and that is that the The family says in a lawsuit that officers had been called to this home over 100 times. The call that came in, and I'm gonna read out what the 911 dispatch was to the officers. Call came in from the mother, I've got a mentally ill son and I need help getting him to Parkland Hospital. And here's what the officers heard in their cruiser. 7:15 over, 7:25, and then they say the address. Bipolar, schizophrenic, black male, bold, white t-shirt, gray capri pants, man is arguing, needs to go to Parkland. So the officers are responding knowingly, if they didn't already know from the many different officer responses to that home, that this is a bipolar schizophrenic man needing to go to the hospital. Why then would they have put themselves in a position to be so close to that door and so close to a volatile person?
Well, let me ask you, what do you think they should have done? Get on their loudspeaker at the end of the driveway and order the family and everybody out of the house. Now, that's not realistic, and keep in mind, and I don't know a lot of these facts, I'm just speaking on the tactics. The officers approach the door in a calm manner. I mean, there's no question about that. They're very calm, relaxed. They knock on the door. Their voice is very calm and relaxed. Quite frankly, the first person who actually yells, who uses extremely loud voice, is the mother, not the officers. And yes, when somebody has a weapon, your voice will almost naturally become elevated. But the officers did a great job. They remained calm. And then I know what you're thinking, well, maybe they should have backed off of the porch. And I'm going to use a funny term to describe a zone, an area, a hula hoop. Imagine, Ashley, a hula hoop. Think of the area that's within that hula hoop. Now, they're on a kind of slightly elevated. There's cars blocking them to come in and out of that where the mother is. She walks right by them. And what you don't see clearly on the video is the facial postures that she's using, what she's saying with her face. But what she said with her voice was very clear. He's crazy, he's bipolar, he's schizo, and she continues to leave instead of standing right there saying something to the effect of, would you help him, please? Okay, now keep that in mind. So you've got less than seconds. Their attention is drawn immediately to him. And keep in mind also, too, Ashley, that you've got two officers who have two different views. One may be looking to the right, to the left, one may be looking over, and one may be looking to the mother, and the other one says, drop the weapon, put the knife down, whatever the words he uses. We expect in law enforcement, and the public should know this, there should be an immediate answer to that call. Suspects, violators,
with
citizens.
People who aren't mentally ill, you're absolutely right. You are right. But with people who are troubled and knowingly troubled, doesn't that change the equation? And maybe that loudspeaker that you suggested actually might have been a better idea. Loudspeaker from the end of the outside the hula hoop. Stay outside the hula hoop when you respond to this kind of a location that is so known to you for dangerous situations even in the past.
And I'm going to tell you that's very unrealistic. With the call load that police officers have, and I know each call is important, but with time constraints with police officers, that's totally unrealistic. The officers, their approach was perfect. But still, let's go back to that hula hoop. Keep in mind this, that the suspect has a screwdriver. That's a deadly weapon. Imagine somebody sticking that screwdriver in your eye, in your face, in your heart, anywhere on your body. You would react negatively if somebody were that close to you.
From Charlottesville to Seattle to Houston,